President Joe Biden has signed yet another woke policy into law. He did so on Friday after the White House put out an official statement saying racial discrimination created a situation in which minority groups are more likely to suffer from various environmental harms and are purportedly more susceptible to the impact of climate change. So the executive order is forcing the entire federal government to focus on addressing environmental justice. For far too long, communities across our country have faced persistent environmental injustice through toxic pollution, underinvestment in infrastructure, and critical services, and other disproportionate environmental harms, often due to a legacy of racial discrimination, including redlining. These communities with environmental justice concerns face even greater burdens due to climate change. And in other news, the President of the United States got fact check on Twitter on Thursday after saying this: "I make no apologies for being the most pro-union president in American history." Twitter isn't what it used to be. You can't say whatever you want just because you're a Democrat. Elon Musk's Twitter actually holds people responsible for what they claim. Like in Joe Biden's case. He claims to be pro-union, but as Twitter pointed out, President Biden signed a bill to block the railroad union from striking on December 22nd last year. Joining me now to discuss, founder and CEO of Celebrity Motor Cars, Tom Maoli. Thanks so much for being with us, Tom. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me on. How are you, Allison?
Great, thank you. How are you?
Great.
Awesome. So I want to know what's really going on behind this call for the entire federal government to focus on addressing environmental justice. Are we headed towards being put back on lockdowns in the name of a so-called climate emergency?
You know, I think that's next. I think it's pretty comical. I think the president needs to step back and take a look at, they're pushing this whole electric car agenda. And, in order to create electric, you need to burn fossil fuel. So we're creating the same carbon emissions that are out there today. We're just doing it in a different manner. And, there was a study done on the electric vehicle, and it weighs twice the amount of the car that's on the road today. So we're going to be tearing up the roads. There's road taxes that are coming for electric vehicles because the weight tears up the road. So the consumer's taking it on the head from all of this. And I don't know where they're going with it. It's clearly a Democratic agenda.
Yeah, it certainly is. And as you mentioned, there's many things in the works that are being developed to really set us up for failure, I think. But Chevron and Exxon are now developing a cleaner gas as an alternative to EVs. Do you think this is potentially a step in the right direction?
Oh, it's definitely a step in the right direction. They have fossil fuels, and they've perfected them that will reduce the carbon emission by 75%. And the cost is much more cost effective than putting an electric vehicle on the road. I was just on another news station the other day having this entire discussion. It's $65,000 to $70,000 to purchase an electric vehicle. The consumer has to install a charger in their house. They have to buy the charger. That's between the charger and the installation. That's another $10,000. And then they're really, the infrastructure is not there to charge it. So when they're out on the road, they have to find a place to charge that vehicle. The infrastructure is not there. It's not cost effective. And if the battery goes bad in that car, it's 60 to 65% of the cost of the vehicle. It's $35,000 to replace that battery. It is not cost effective for the consumer.
Yeah, it's absolutely not. And I think Americans are coming to that realization. Many of them are fighting back inadvertently or not, because a recent poll shows only 19% of Americans are even likely to buy an EV as their next car. And I'm guessing this is because they're coming to the realization that it's just too expensive and the drawbacks just aren't worth it, right?
That is correct. The consumers are coming into the showrooms. They don't want to buy the electric vehicles. And, I'm not sure why the government's pushing it on the consumer. They have fair trade laws that are in place. They have antitrust laws that are in place. The consumer is supposed to be able to make their own decision as to where they want to spend their hard-earned pay. And the government's taking that away from us.
Yeah, they certainly are. And it's very scary when you really think about it. I don't think a lot of people think that far ahead and think about some of the more nefarious, plans behind this agenda. But I don't know. That's why we're trying to get the message out. But speaking of the drawbacks of EVs, they are also proved to be too heavy for parking garages, which is just insane. Here they are pushing it, saying we have to go fully electric by 2050. Correct. I mean, how is this even sustainable if we don't even have an infrastructure to support this?
It's not sustainable. It's not going to happen. I see it as part of the marketplace. Electric will survive. It's going to be like hybrids and diesels. It's going to be a part of the marketplace, but it's not going to be the marketplace. It's not going to take over the world, and it's being shown already. You have companies like Mercedes-Benz and BMW are having trouble selling their electric vehicles. The consumer doesn't want it. And if you peel back the onion and you look at Tesla's earnings, most of their growth is coming from China.
Yeah, I think that kind of says it all. Last question for you. The EPA is trying to enforce strict regulations on the types of cars that we can buy.
Yes,
and they're using this Clean Air Act authority to basically phase out the vehicles they deem to have too high of emissions. Where do you think this lands us in the future moving forward if people are opposed to the EVs?
Listen, I think the EPA, like anything else, they're going to try. I think it's a Democratic Biden agenda. I think, we're coming to an election term here, in short order. It's around the corner. And I think that's all going to change. And the laws are going to change. And I think, the consumer's going to drive that process because the consumer's not buying into it. Look at Ford. Ford is they lost $2 billion last quarter because they cannot figure out how to make money on electric vehicles. So while the federal government is pushing this agenda, not only are they hurting the consumer in their pocketbook, but they're hurting their pension funds and their investments. So it's going to come to an end. It's hitting a brick wall as we speak, and it's starting to slow down. And I don't see it surviving.
Yeah, I certainly hope that is indeed the case. Let's pray for a turnaround here and for common sense to prevail. Tom,
correct. Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please let people know where they can find you and follow you for more.
Absolutely. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Take care.